Next is Mr. Yánnis Varoufakis, Capitalism and Related Structural Dynamics Behind the Genocide.
My name is Yánnis Varoufakis. I'm an economist, a politician, and an activist representing Greece's Mera25 party as well as the pan-European radical movement DiEM25. And I'm here in my capacity as an expert on the manner in which capitalist dynamics are fueling and reinforcing the genocide of the Palestinian people. Today, with a view to assisting the jury to reach an informed verdict, I shall address the economic forces underpinning the complicity of global capital in initially the ethnic cleansing of Palestinians and more recently their genocide. The jury should want to keep in mind that genocide pays, and I shall be arguing later, it pays a great deal more now that a new form of capital has evolved and is involved in the execution of genocide. To begin, the jury should want to acknowledge that capitalism thrives on human misery and in sheer destruction. There is therefore no great paradox in the fact that at a time when demand for goods and services, production, and consumer confidence are falling precipitously in Israel, nevertheless, at this very same time, the Israeli Stock Exchange not only did not fall since the Gaza genocide began, but in fact it rose by more than 160%. This reflects the underlying political economy of occupation, and in particular, the manner in which thousands of Israeli companies are intertwined with American, European, Korean merger corporations, as well as one large Brazilian company, shamefully, including the world's weightiest financial conglomerates, all that comprising an international network that kicked into overdrive after October 2023. The moment the Israeli defense budget doubled, it crowded into Israel's financial circuits large investments and therefore enablers of its killing machine. For more detailed information on this, the jury should take into account the excellent report to the United Nations published by Francesca Albanese, the United Nations Special Rapporteur on the occupied Palestinian territories. Francesca's report is entitled From Economy of Occupation to Economy of Genocide. Of course, none of this is new, per se. History teaches us that economic interests have been key drivers and enablers of colonial enterprises and often of the genocides they perpetrated. The corporate sector has been intrinsic to colonialism since its inception, with corporations beginning with the Dutch and the British East India companies, historically contributing to the violence against, the exploitation of, and ultimately the dispossession of indigenous people and lands, a mode of domination known as racial colonial capitalism. Israel's colonization of the occupied Palestinian lands could not have been an exception. The jury should be aware of the manner in which Palestine today demonstrates all three phases of colonial expropriation. First came the phase of unsophisticated, brutalist expropriation, the brutal plunder of land and the conversion of indigenous people into either refugees or, more likely, cheap and even slave labor. That phase, which led to the rise of capitalism in the 18th century, has been evidenced in Palestine at least since the Balfour Declaration, and much, much more so during and in the aftermath of the Nakba. Palestinian land was brutally expropriated, and the Palestinians either turned into refugees or encased in Bantustans, which ended up, until at least the Second Intifada, providing cheap labor to the colonizers. Now, turning to the second phase of modern colonialism, also known as neo-imperialism, that did not so much concern the plunder of land as it was intended to secure markets for the surplus commodities produced in the capitalist metropolis, commodities that the capitalist metropolis could not absorb domestically due to insufficient domestic demand. The neo-imperialist dimension also made its appearance in Palestine in connection to the plight of the Palestinian people, as Israel began to absorb massive quantities of weaponry imported from the United States, from Germany, from the United Kingdom and elsewhere, imports into Israel that contributed significantly to the aggregate demand of the exporting countries. More recently still, the Israeli arms manufacturers have managed to enter this game as exporters by exporting high-tech weaponry tried and tested on the Palestinian population, exporting those technologies to foreign countries, including, shamefully, to my own country, Greece, but also to Arab countries, too. Let's not forget that. And that brings me to the third phase of contemporary capital accumulation, feeding expropriation at home and colonialism abroad. The phase which I like to refer to as the techno-feudal phase, a phase underpinned by the accumulation of a new radical form of capital, which I've called cloud capital. War, ladies and gentlemen, was always lucrative. Arms dealers made fortunes from supplying weapons to the highest bidder. Indirectly, all sorts of capital, including capital that produced consumer goods, accumulated faster at times of war and destruction. But in this techno-feudal age, phase that I'm referring to, cloud capital, this new radical form of capital, accumulates new powers in the battlefields. How? Directly by improving its algorithms' capacity to understand and to manipulate humans. Nothing helps cloud capital improve its efficiency than the real-time experience of monitoring and manipulating the behavior of combatants, of target selectors, those people in the military who select targets, of the politicians that enable these target selectors, and yes, tragically, of the population targeted for annihilation. The jury will want to note that cloud capital is a network of machines comprising smartphones, tablets, servers, algorithms, a network of machines which does something remarkable. We train it, this network of machines, to train us, to train it, that network of machines, to know us well enough, and eventually to manipulate our behavior, therefore imparting, giving the owners of this cloud capital exorbitant powers to do things to us against our will in their interest. In this context, the jury should want to take into account the fact that no country in the world has given as much access to a population's biometric data as Israel has given, let's say, to a company like IBM. And since the Gaza genocide began, Microsoft, Amazon, Alphabet, that is Google, and Palantir, let's not forget Palantir, have been expanding their cloud capital penetration at a breathtaking pace. Face recognition software, target selection algorithms, and automated execution systems are being tested in real time, at will, and with fewer ethical constraints than in the case of experiments on laboratory rats. America's big tech, Silicon Valley, could not be happier with the genocide. The jury should therefore be aware of the fact that today's AI targeting devices that maximize death and destruction in Gaza will tomorrow morning power up the Amazon or Google or Microsoft algorithms, which make us buy stuff we neither need nor want, algorithms which poison our conversations in our social media here in the West, that drive increasingly dispossessed proletarians, drivers, nurses, and warehouse workers. In other words, I call upon the jury to note that what is happening in Palestine, the unfolding ethnic cleansing in the West Bank, East Jerusalem, the genocide in Gaza, is totally intertwined with the forms of exploitation and the toxification of our social milieu in the rest of the world. In this sense, yes, our freedom in the rest of the world is certainly connected with the liberation of Palestinians from colonialism, expropriation, fear, and manipulation. To conclude, I would like to thank the jury for its important work and to implore its members to pay attention to the manner in which capitalist dynamics, especially the capitalist dynamics underpinning the reproduction of cloud capital, the way that these dynamics are fueling and reinforcing the genocide of the Palestinian people should be a significant part of your deliberations. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Varoufakis.